Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to okay, that's Konstantin. He's helping. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm not totally sure what I'm going to tell you today, but there's a title. It's a title I gave to Vittorio Gallese when he invited me, and it's The Elsewhere Generation, Etymological Concerns Around the Words Research and Innovation. I'm happy to join also because I've often asked Vittorio Gallese to do things in the projects that I've put together during exhibitions, mainly because I find his scientific method so far from my own associative, intuitive, illogical mode of operation. So I see his participation always as a very fruitful contradiction. I feared, and still do, but some years ago, I feared neuroscience quite a lot, and the fashion for it that was growing, and went to look for him, mainly because I felt that neuroscience was the expression of an excessive turn towards the organic body to explain the mind, while philosophy was waning and less provable. It reminded me of situations connected also with the past of where my base is. My base is Torino, where I'm directing the Castello di Rivoli, and as you know, the history of phrenology and the consequences of phrenology in control of individuals, it takes its steps from Torino. I felt that this research, based on measuring cerebral activity and heart pulsation and more, was reducing the body to the body what cannot be so, and would be helpful mainly to business and to advertising, making them able to better manipulate potential customers through the knowledges gained from the research of the neuroscientists. Yet Gallese always surprises me. For instance, yesterday he admitted that his research did help power to control people through applications of it, and yet at the same time it provided the tools for people to become free from that same manipulation, because we can all better understand how our mind bodies work. Furthermore, yesterday's theory of ES, embodied simulation, spoke of how images are no longer only passively seen or watched, mainly by the eye, but rather, due to touchscreen technologies on our phones, are scrolled over, moved, zoomed in on, shrinked, all at the tip of our sensual fingers, thus making image experience a tactile and engaged and empowered experience for people. The question is, in Web 4.0, there are no more these screens, touch screens. We are here to speak about the bubble, which generally has had negative associations of a disconnection with reality, whatever that may be. Essere in una bolla, also in Italian. An economic bubble just before a crash, a person out of touch with those around him or her, living in his or her own world, or even a community of people who share beliefs and do not recognize the presence of others, etc. In particular, it seems there's an opposition between people who believe we are living ever more detached from embodied reality in a bubble created by technology and most recently AI, artificial intelligence, and those who are not present here in this room, but we are in a bubble here, who embrace a technophile idea of progress through digital technology and AI and robots, That's the majority of industry today. One of the sad shifts that has taken place is the shift, indeed, just mentioned from Web 2.0, where users contribute and there was a community focus and an idea that we could be others, that one can be another, to the world of 3.0 and its portable devices and growing focus on the individual, to what seems to be coming, which is an individualistic, unjust, deeply divided world of Homo Deus, or Homo Dei, where a select few have a world where the digital predicts and shapes and enters into a directive position in our daily lives, the world telling me I should exercise more or buy milk. Although it is wrong to fear and criticize innovation, and I think the next talk might be about that, it is also fine to see some wisdom in Friedrich Nietzsche or in De Chirico's shudder in front of the stupidity and ignorance of the technophiles rushing with their railroads and radios at the time towards catastrophe, the World War I, and to claim instead the positivity of anachronism and inactualität, the opposite of innovation, or to see Clay's Angelus Novus that Vittorio showed us yesterday a slide of, again, as did Benjamin, a world rushing towards disaster and its rubble. And yet, I think for those of you who've heard my questions, I find this dualistic opposition or confrontation between human intelligence and AI in itself a bubble that excludes all other intelligences and agencies that make up our worlds and our cosmos. For those of you who saw Documenta 13, they know of my interest in the theories and thinkings of Donna Haraway, Karen Barad, to quote just a few people who see the real issue at stake as not between AI and HI, but between AI, HI, and NHI, non-human intelligences. Now, the process that we're discussing today seems to have started with the so-called elsewhere generation, which I hope people might use more and more, this term. I heard it, generation elsewhere, when the Phillips collection did a little panel about a year ago, but I think it's a good description. The process seems to start with the elsewhere generation, that is, with the telephone, actually, and mainly with the portable cell phone in the early 1990s, and before the web that uses the internet, therefore, to be in one place and communicate with people in another at the same time. Artistic research began with the avant-gardes claiming art as knowledge, against the notion of art as expression. But artistic research and the avant-gardes did not claim to be applied research. In the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, to search for something seemed more restrictive than to research, as it had an objective. You are searching for something you may have lost, a pen. To search for something was linear, like grabbing an object, motivated by an intention. To research was only, at the time, fundamental research, closer to a recherche du temps perdu, in a state of flaneur. It was an intoxicated search, literally also from my memories. It was more of the order of a circle, which is the etymological source of cerchio and search. To search, it was actually, cercare comes from the hunters putting a rope in the woods when they are hunting and pulling it closer and closer to get the animals to the center. So it was more of the order of the circle, circling around and yet never grasping, but being in a state of seeing it from various perspectives and all around it. So we are going to talk about vision today and points of view. Today, business has changed these words around and their connotations. Now we have R&D, research and development. And it must have applications, and the pure wonder and waste, the dépense of time, seems not to exist as much anymore. So today I recover the word search again, which seems more free because it contains at least the obscurity of having lost something. Innovation, the process of translating an idea or invention into a good or service that creates value or for which customers will pay, is the way in which the word innovation is used today. It is an idea, therefore, that cannot be unique, a one-timer, but it must be replicable, and it must have an economical cost and satisfy specific needs. So this brings us to the question of, I just mentioned, trying to understand how 4.0 will work for better and for worse. So we are speaking of a movement away from VR, virtual reality, into AR, augmented reality, which means that industry and business is telling us that our daily walking through the world will be a layered walking through the world, a little bit like Pokemons were in an early version of it. And there is a fear of this augmented reality. I'm not so sure, from the perspective of someone working in the field of art, that it will be such a novelty, because all our experience in this gallery as well, when we look at a so-called artwork, we are always looking onto elements of the symbolic that are layered and that have an embodied materiality, that are layered within the so-called real world. So from seeing a fresco in a church in the 1300s, or to seeing a painting in a gallery, we are constantly in the state of understanding that images are not imaginary, they're not in our brains, but images have a physical materiality to them, even when in the brain, as both Islamic aesthetics or Aristotle somehow understood. So an image can be in a space, even without a viewer seeing the image or producing the image in the brain. If there is a mirror in the space, the image of the object is there as a physical presence. So I don't see the question of augmented reality as particularly problematic, but what I do see as problematic, being a Donna Haraway, of course I wouldn't see it as problematic. I mean, having she written the Cyborg Manifesto already in the 1980s, well before these discussions. Problematic is the inability to see robots as humans or as slaves of today's society with no civil rights, and to see them detached from humans or from bees. The issue of virtual reality, on the other hand, with the Google glasses, we shall see, this is all a premessa forward, I do see as problematic, and they will be widely distributed, and they are growing within museums that are not art museums, because they are also a tool for immobility and for a kind of constructing a break between the so-called image and the so-called materiality of embodied life. So what do artists do? Artists generally repeat bubbles. What they do is they repeat bubbles to make you aware of the condition that you are in of isolation or alienation. So you embody the bubble in order to criticize it. This is a traditional avant-garde technique of deactivating mechanisms. But before we look at some of the artists, I would like to mention a few things that came to my mind after the last talk or over the last 2 days. Particularly, this is an image of the Salvator Mundi, the so-called Leonardo, that was sold at auction at Christie's last October for 450 million euros, including the percentage for Christie's itself, of course. And these are two pictures of it. On the left, you have to take my word as a narrator. On the left, you have before restoration. It's a painting found in the late 1950s in Louisiana, and it was heavily restored after it went from $10 to 10,000 to much more than that. By the time it got to about several million, it was restored. It began to be restored by Daniela Modestini, who lives in Florence. She's an art restorer. And in the period in which it was restored, she was working for the Crest Foundation. It was also reattributed through a number of sales and expertise, in particular Martin Kemp, who is an art historian in Oxford, who actually is not an art historian, he's a chemist. So he's rather famous for his reattributions through chemical testing. And it's the second Leonardo that he has attributed as authentic Leonardo in the period of the 2000s. During the period of the restoration and of the reattribution, it was premiered as a Leonardo in the exhibition of Leonardo at the National Gallery in 2012, more or less. I can't remember, more or less when I did the documenta. And it is interesting to note that the director of the National Gallery, Penny, resigned shortly thereafter and gave interviews where he said that everyone could decide for themselves if it was a Leonardo or not. The painting on the right is, of course, after Daniela Modestini's work on it. And I will not tell you my source, my deep throat, but there is a deep throat who tells me, my source tells me that she's still contacting the Louvre in Abu Dhabi trying to continue to paint it because she painted it for 6 years. So it's an interesting kind of relationship with an artwork. Now, the reason I wanted to bring it up is that, of course, it connects with all the issues we were discussing about fake news and real news and how you make facts, how you construct facts and so on. And what occurred at that moment with that sale is actually within the financialization of art, which has happened. It's part of the investments of the financial investments that are going on to a degree that differs from previous financializations of art, for the simple fact that with this sale we have detached the artwork from the sale of the artwork, like when you detach the gold from the dollar, which happened, I think, in the 70s. So this means that so-called art no longer needs to exist for the purpose of the art system or the value system around art. Therefore, we have the free ports that Hito Steyr has written about very eloquently, the growth of free ports where the artworks are hosted without ever being shown to any audience. It's interesting to note that one of the owners of the Salvator Mundi is Bouvier, who is the founder of the first free port in Switzerland. Okay. Anyway, to go a little bit backwards, I also wanted to remind you that this ability of artists to predict society, because they are a little bit empathetic, tend to be rather empathetic figures. Of course, I'm the person who says that art doesn't even exist and that art is a convention created in the 18th century with Winkelmann and so forth and Kant, and that throughout history there was not something called art. And then we read backwards 40,000 years or 50,000 years to the cave paintings. We read backwards our definitions of art, which are actually modern Western white definitions of art. But let's give it let's give it the benefit of the doubt. This thing that we all call art, but which we should question as a category itself as existing even, because it's a relative to a certain history that it exists in a certain society. Now it's been globalized as a concept. But let's just say that it exists for a minute. So within this thing we call art, the artists often have very predictive abilities of understanding, and often their projects are not only what we see at face value as an object, but they are also systemic interventions into the system. This is not only true of our times, from the avant-gardes, it's true from forever. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci, ever since art starts to exist, which we could say starts with the first signing of artworks, which is Leonardo, so we could say from the 1500s onwards, but we could backtrack a little bit in this Western definition of what art is, because in the Western definition we always accept that Middle Ages in Europe is more of a collective endeavor, you know, that people don't sign and they make architecture and art and sculpture and frescoes. Vasari is the one who gives individual identity strong to artists such as Giotto and so on, but he doesn't go further back than the 1200s, late 1200s, Cimabue and so on. But anyway, that's me getting lost in philology of art history. But back to what we're talking about, this question of the Salvator Mundi, of course, needs to be seen as a societal moment that, however, was preceded by a certain number of events in art, including Damien Hirst's activities. And now Damien Hirst in 2007 made For the Love of God, which at the time had a huge, which still has a huge production cost, because it's all made with diamonds. And the diamonds were borrowed at the time from one of the most important jewelers in the world. And the skull is a way of making a mathematical problem, which is how can you make an artwork the value of the materials of which is superior to the value of the market could ever have of that artwork at that time. So it's a kind of mathematical, logical problem, like in a chess game that he played. Of course, the work was sold for 50 million, probably to himself in part, and to Jay Jopling of White Cube shortly thereafter in August 2007. And we know that in 2007 is the beginning of the financial crisis, the first part of it. And in 2008 is the main part of the global financial crisis. And 2 weeks before, late September, when the global financial crisis hits with Lehman Brothers collapse, Damien organizes the first auction of a single artist, live artist auction work, and sells his own work, and for millions and millions. For millions and millions, I can't tell you how many, I don't know, like 100 million euros. And of course, 2 weeks later, all the people who bought it, who were the people who are increasing their patrimoine through the various questions of Facebook and Amazon and so on that we were discussing in the last talk, the value collapses, of course. So it becomes half the value 2 weeks later. So a kind of Robin Hood event occurred, which is interesting, because I'm sure Damien Hirst could not predict that 2 weeks later the works would be worth half, but nonetheless it happened, and which is why I'm in the art field, because it's like being in magic. I mean, we're in entanglement, and that's why I also like Theosophy and Annie Besant. It's all about entanglement, and time and space are folded, as any quantum physicist would know. So I do not see time as linear and chronological. I do not see that this is 2 weeks before that. I see time and space as actually my friend Anton Zellinger, the quantum physicist who runs the lab in Vienna, would see it. Anton says, you either change your definition of reality or you have to believe in God. I prefer to change the definition of reality, or how I conceive reality, being a scientist. And I would agree with him. So some years later, which is just very recently, Damien Hirst does another action, which is he organizes with Pinault, who, by the way, owns Christie's, which is the largest auction house in the world, where the Leonardo was sold. In the private museum of Pinault, he organizes this exhibition, which is considered by Art News disastrous, because it's just horrible according to the art world, full of these incredible, ugly, very over-the-top Baroque sculptures. And fundamentally, it's based on a fiction, on a fake news, which is that there's been a shipwreck, and the shipwreck things under the sea have been found, and they are brought to the surface, and the exhibition is the exhibition of these objects. Damien sold the sculptures before the opening of the Venice exhibition for millions of euros to the very same people, those 80 people who run the world, that own half the wealth of the planet today, that we are speaking about before. Only some Americans were mentioned in the previous talk, like Jeff Bezos and so forth, but these 80 people also comprise people in China, Wang Wei, they comprise Ryboloviev in Russia, and Mikhailson probably in Russia. So they comprise, it's a global thing, it's not an American thing. This kind of new Middle Ages that we are living, of concentration of power. Anyway, so I think in a way that Damien was simply repeating the problem, you see, that we are living in terms of the way global financial capitalism, in alliance with the way that the web and the digital society works, is provoking. So it's just showing it on the level of that. Now, I wanted to show you a few more artists' works, and then, if you're very patient, you get a treat at the end of the talk, which is in quite a while. So we will get to that treat. But I wanted to mention that artists, as I said, tend to repeat problems, or at least one avenue is to repeat problems. There are other avenues. The more, let's say, romantic artists tend to go against the problem directly, and sometimes, like Pelizza da Volpedo, who painted the beautiful Quarto Stato, which became a symbol of socialism throughout the 20th century, where you see a crowd of people walking towards you. It became part of Eisenstein films and also Novecento and so on. Everybody knows this painting. He committed suicide in 1910. So that is also a consequence that sometimes the more antagonistic artists end up in, which is sad. And we know also Benjamin committed suicide in Portbou on his way out. But let's say the less romantic artists and the more antagonistic strategic artists tend to repeat problems in order to make the audience and themselves understand. It's also a personal search to learn how it works, how does it work? So Gorzka Machuga is an artist that I've worked quite a lot with, including in the Documenta. And this is part of her exhibition, which she made for the Fondazione Prada. Prada is not part of the 80, even though we know the bags and the shoes very well. For the foundation, it was maybe 2016 or maybe 2017. I can't remember, but you can all figure it out in 2 seconds, on your phones. So I didn't bother to check it. But she basically made a copy of her boyfriend. So she breaks a certain number of rules. One of them is that older women cannot have younger boyfriends, and silly ideas of the patriarchal society. And she has a gorgeous mathematician young boyfriend. And so in order to not have to see him grow old, which would sadden her tremendously, as it saddens most men tremendously to see their wives age, they often leave them for younger women for that purpose, because they haven't figured out what Gorzka had figured out, which is how to make a robot, artificial intelligence, product, which is her boyfriend. So he's the most famous young boyfriend of an older woman in the art world. And he talks about philosophy, and now we need to show you him speaking. So we will. Just a minute. What does this mean? I need, wait a minute, Konstantin, I think I can manage this. Just try, let's try. Weiter. Okay, now I have to put it aside. No, not aside like that. Just a minute, everybody, just wait. We have to wait. No, just a minute. I'm going to try again. It gives a little interval, you know. It's works in the spectacle. So we move it aside and bring him in. Yes. Now we look here and find the damn little thing. He's not showing up. Okay. I know it's to the right, but I can't get voila, the mouse. We make this bigger. And now, what does this say? This one? Yeah. Okay. And now we do this.
To be joined in a true union of nations, or to perish in a war of annihilation ending in the extinction. 1863. Any society in turmoil today, it has been said that we have it in our power to begin the world over again.
We have it in our power to begin the world again. Okay, so we have it in our power to begin the world again. We have it in our power to begin the world again. Now, okay, so I wanted to bring that in. So the question of, let's say, the relationship with robots is a question that not only is in science fiction and has been for many, many years, both in literature and in film, but is clearly a big issue in the arts of our time, in parallel with the R&D developments of robots in industry and in business. Now, another artist that I think is important to think about and to think through and to think with today is, of course, who lives in Berlin, made a piece called Hell Yeah, We Fuck Die, which is made of the most repeated words on websites and things, social media and the internet. So Hell Yeah, We Fuck Die. She made for 2016 for the 32nd São Paulo Biennale, which was called Incertezza Viva, so live uncertainty. And then she again showed it in the Münster in 2017, so some of you may have seen it there. And it features synchronized videos whose images were collected from various online sources, where robots are provoked and scourged in different ways in product quality testing, because robots have to function, so they have to not break. So we're torturing these robots in these quality test things. And it became an installation revealing a sense of reality that's absurd, which is articulated also by these tensions. And we're going to show, I had two versions, but I think that we should show the São Paulo version, which shows you just a little bit of it with her interview about the piece. So now, how come it's already there? It's already there. It's unbelievable. It's fine, it's fine. Yeah, we make it big.
I cannot help but feeling empathy with the poor robots which are being kicked around all the time, and they are being kicked, of course, to test them, to improve their sense of balance, their sense of autonomy, and so on. But somehow, by being tortured all the time, the robots gain something very, I don't know, very anthropomorphic, and I end up seeing them as fellow workers, you know. This is what the word robot means. It means worker. Robot means worker. And I think, okay, you know, you are in the same position as all the other workers. You're getting tortured as well. Of course, you know, then the second level of complication sets in, because of course robots, automation are actually putting huge amounts of people around the world out of work, right? So they are being competition workers actually, and so on and so on. But there's also another funny aspect in this video. There is all sorts of scientific videos of creatures who try to walk, you know, and they are animals which look a bit like dinosaurs, but they never existed, you know, and they are only developed for the purpose of falling over in the simulation. So they are basically developed in order to be extinct. It's really, you develop a new species just for the purpose of having it fall over all the time, you know.
Okay. Okay. So another artist that I think I think a lot about nowadays is Jordan Wolfson, with whom I've never yet worked, but of course know the work. And just right now, currently at Tate in London, is an installation of his called Colored Sculpture from 2016. And it is effectively a kind of marionette that's being tortured. It follows you with facial recognition software in the eyes, and it connects with the people who are around, and it is tortured. Now I will show you a little bit of that. If I could find the damn thing. Here it is. Okay. We did a good job. It just comes up. So now we need to put this down here. Oh. I'm not going to show you 15 minutes, but I want, because the time would be up, but I want to show you a little bit of the piece as it is now installed in the tape. This is the video that you can't record, by the way, that you have to edit out. But you can keep the sound. shortly after making this piece in 2016, Wolfson makes another piece which was extremely controversial for the Whitney Biennial in 2017. He uses the Google glasses that are being now put on the market to augment our reality, our experience of museums, our experience of life, and keep you sitting in the same place. And he does this, which I will now show you. Now, what I can show you is clearly not the experience in the Google glasses. I can only show you the film on a flat screen that you would see in the Google glasses as 3D around you, that you can put your head to the right or to the left to avoid the scene if you wish. But that cannot happen here. So you will see something that is bubble vision, flat out, just to understand what bubble vision is. And then we'll go back to Hito. Oh, thank you. You want to do that? You can't record this either.
Too late.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So you're wearing the headphones, and for 20 seconds, nothing happens. This is Hanukkah poem. It's one of the viscerally most disturbing works of art that I know. The total punches and so forth, it's not an accident, what I mean to say, that he used these Google glasses, because I believe that what he was trying to do is to show the transformation into a violent individuals through the technology that we use to see the world in an empowered way, such as through Google glasses. So I think, well, I would like to stop it. And now what do I do? Oh yeah, okay. So, okay. So the work is a kind of exemplary work, in my view, exemplary work to express what the consequences of the digital revolution and of bubble vision, what it may provoke. So now I would like to link to this, where Hito speaks about bubble vision. This has nothing to do, my phone is ringing, it's unbelievable. We can't answer it. That's the elsewhere generation. Okay, so I would like now to now this would be 15 minutes, and we don't have 15 minutes, but we have at least 10, I think, or because we started a little bit late. Yeah.
So actually, I'm not going to talk about AI straight away, but I'm going to take some sort of detour, because I usually work with these visuals. So I'm going to start off talking about something which seems slightly different on first glance, namely what I call bubble vision. What is bubble vision? It's about immersive technologies like VR and 360-degree videos, which are kind of spherical, and they are built on a sort of very strange paradox, which is also very well known, because the viewer is at the center of the sphere, yet at the same time he or she are actually missing from it. They are fully immersed into something they are not part of. Not only your head is invisible inside these spheres, but also your hands and also your feet. So this kind of vision is actually shaped by round things, by orbs, by spheres, by rounded lenses. One could call this paradigm bubble vision. In the last decade, 360-degree panoramas became common in photography, in video, and VR. And in parallel, there were also, of course, lots of discussions about so-called filter bubbles on social media that have been said to nurture division by creating parallel information universes, even though those statements are contested.
You may remember that the Salvator Mundi holds a sphere, a glass sphere.
Of neoliberal globalization, so-called
And globalization as a word starts more or less in the 1960s, and it comes at the same time as satellites. Therefore, it's a vision of a globe, bubble vision.
I think that this period is most likely over, but it would be completely wrong to read this as the disappearance of the bubble paradigm. Instead, if any bubble burst at all, it didn't just vanish, it just multiplied into a multitude of smaller, steely bubbles.
Okay,
In
so
art history, bubbles were already
I suggest that you watch this
servants.
on
It's also
the internet, because we don't have the time to watch it all, but it's an extremely interesting 15-minute talk about bubbles, metaphorically and spatially, and as structures of power. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to mention, the last artist, is Markus Lutyens, with whom I have been working for years and years and years, and it expresses the romantic side of my work. Markus Lutyens doesn't use technology or AI or VR or anything, but he does provoke the imagination to produce situations of VR without any technology. Now, he happens to be a descendant of Mary Lutyens. Mary Lutyens was related to the Lutyens architect who built Delhi, but she is most importantly a theosophist. And as Annie Besant and Madame Blavatsky, the theosophists had a cosmic vision. They precede the anthroposophists. Actually, Steiner was a theosophist before being an anthroposophist. And the theosophists are very connected to the developments in science at the time, and to the possibility of seeing the invisible. They were influenced by the birth of many things, including X-rays and X-ray vision and all these, the negative of photography and so on and so forth, in the 1800s. Markus Lutyens, I think, continues a theosophical tradition through his work, which is based on the technique of hypnotizing. And I will now hypnotize you through an artwork of Markus Lutyens, for those of you who would like that, enjoy that. It's a 7-minute event. But this is the little house where Markus was hypnotizing people during the Documenta 13. And we hypnotized 1,700 visitors, which of course is not 900,000 of the Documenta, because there's a time that it just takes to hypnotize people. You can't hypnotize them so fast. But we built this little house, which is actually a physical house that has a mirror image. So it's not a mirror. The inside of the house is physical. You walk down the stairs, which look like the roof. And this is potions, but this is another place. This is not in Documenta. It's another situation where Marcos hypnotized Tiasto Gates and Andri Sala and myself. He hypnotized Orhan Pamuk and Ivana Blazwick. So the art world gets hypnotized by Marcos Lutins. It's his practice. That's what he does. He hypnotizes people. So now, why is it interesting to me? It's interesting because it reminds us that beyond virtual reality and beyond Facebooks and beyond all of this stuff and beyond the internet, there also is telepathy. There also is folded space and time. There also is a whole bunch of other things that people don't acknowledge as scientifically now. The same way in the 1500s, they probably would not acknowledge a cell phone, and yet we know that they work. And therefore, I encourage you now to close your eyes. If you'd like to, you probably won't get hypnotized in 7 minutes that this lasts, but if you would like to try to at least relax, it's not so different from relaxation in yoga and things like that. I would suggest that you just sit down, calmly, and close your eyes and listen to the instructions and do exactly as Marcus says. It's not dangerous, don't be afraid. You can wake up. The most beautiful thing about hypnosis, when you've experienced it, and I've been hypnotized at least 24 times by Marcos over the years, people do it to stop smoking, things like that. So it's a very common technique in some psychotherapy. You have to be a licensed hypnotist. He is a licensed hypnotist. The thing that people discover when they experience it is that somehow the conscious self is always there, that it's a place where conscious self and unconscious self somehow coexist in a border zone. So it's not scary. So enjoy. If I can click on it.
Whenever you're ready now, just close your eyes and take a deep breath, and I'd like you to begin to feel a sense of heavy relaxation beginning to descend through the top of your head. And with every breath, I'd like that heavy relaxation to go all the way down the back of your neck and all the way down your back. All the way back now. And with every breath, I'd like you to focus your attention more and more on your hands as they're resting there in your lap. And you can allow them to come together now if they haven't already. I'd like the fingers and the palms of your hands to feel very loose and limp as they're resting there. And in a few moments, I'd like you to imagine yourself at the top of a set of stairs. But maybe these stairs are from a long time ago, or maybe they're just made up in your mind's eye. And I'm going to go down from 10 to 1, and with every number, we're just going to go down one step at a time to a very safe and comfortable place on the inside. 10, taking the first step down now, feeling with each step how much more relaxed you become. 9, taking another step down now and feeling the soles of your feet on the stair treads, heavier and heavier now. 8, going even further down in your own time, with every breath, slower and slower, time is also slowing down. 7, dreaming and drifting now. 6, so heavy in every part of your body, heavy and relaxed. 5, almost halfway down now. 4, even further down now. 3, almost all the way down. 2 and 1, so heavy and relaxed as you're resting there listening to the sound of my voice. And as you find yourself there now, any other thoughts and feelings from outside can just drift off, and if you like, you could be here now. Or maybe you could be somewhere else at another place in another time, but for now, I'd just like you to concentrate all your attention on the heaviness in your hands. So heavy and so light. If you can, I'd like you to very gently feel the top of one of your fingernails with the tip of your finger or thumb. And perhaps you can slide it up and down and begin to feel this hard, smooth surface. And I'm going to count down from 3 to 1, and when I reach 1, you're going to find yourself walking across a hard, concrete surface. 3, focusing all your attention now. 2, feeling that hard, shiny surface. And 1, now walking across this surface, footsteps echoing in this vast space. Your feet against the ground, or perhaps it's the ground pushing up against your feet. You may have noticed the shiny glass walls around you, smooth and hard and cold as you press your cheek up against the glass, so incredibly cold, tingling your cheeks, so shivery cold and hard, feeling the cold, freezing cold on the outside, freezing cold extending through your face, even colder now, freezing cold, your cheeks, your lips, your nose, feeling so incredibly cold against this cold surface. So cold, freezing cold. 3, 2, 1, and out. And just allowing yourself now to move away from the cold, shiny glass and the hard concrete floors, and it's amazing how as your finger slides off your fingernail and under the tip of your finger, you can begin to sense that soft underside, the friction ridges, and finding yourself walking barefoot with a warm carpet against your feet. So incredibly soft and warm and comfortable between your toes. So soft and warm and comfortable between your toes, walking so slowly and so relaxed, so heavy and relaxed, the floor getting softer and softer, almost as if you were sinking right into it. Or perhaps it's rising up around you, feeling so comfortable inside this soft feeling, soft and warm, almost as if you were sinking into a soft pool of feathers. Just a soft pool of feathers dreaming and drifting down, further and further down. And it's amazing to find these two opposite worlds at the tip of your fingers as on the tip of my tongue. And if you'd like to, as a post-hypnotic suggestion, if you'd like to key into your surroundings, just squeeze the tip of your finger and your surroundings will become a part of you. And you, a part of your surroundings, is an extension of you, or they're extending into you, and that's good. And in a few moments now, I'm going to count up from 1 to 5, and when I reach 5, you'll be wide awake now, wide awake. 1, slowly coming back in your own time now. 2, feeling a normal state, coming into every part of your body now. Your hands, and every other part of your body now. 3, coming back now into the room now. 4, stretching and yawning now. And 5, wide awake now, wide awake.
That's all, folks. That's it. Are there any questions?
So, you're talking about human intelligence and artificial intelligence versus non-human intelligence?
Oh, yeah, I cut that out in the talk. You're right. I was going to talk about that. It's not versus. What's the question? Talk about it.
So empathizing with these robots and this sort of tortured sculpture, it seems like integrating the new technological intelligence that you invented and our empathetic emotional intelligence is feasible.
Yes.
And might even be the future. So, do you think that's a technological challenge or a social challenge?
I think if this is like a synopsis, I think if we only look at it from the point of view of human intelligence or human nature, let's call it, and artificial intelligence, we go to fascism. If we are able to integrate these questions with also non-human intelligence, the intelligence of the plants, the emotions of the cosmos, the complications in computation of a ball falling, let's say, in a room. I throw a ball. The computations that the ball is making, or that the air is making, to work that thing out are immense compared to what we know how to do if we look at the primitive nature of artificial intelligence right now. So it's a question of respect and acknowledgement of the abilities of engagement that physical and biological entities have on the planet, including to make the human body and the incredible multi-species coevolution between bacteria that are in my stomach and myself, or between the salt that without which my brain stops to function, and my so-called self. So it's in the humbleness of acknowledging that research has to be put in relation to the research for artificial intelligence for the purpose of a more worldly world. Donna would say a more just world where the planet, it does not belong to humans, nor to humans' artificial intelligence, but belongs to the coevolution of all these species on the planet and their different cultures, civilizations, art, intelligence. Then I think we might have a chance to build a kind of future democracy. I know that it sounds a little bit like Bruno Latour, and I'm not against Bruno Latour, I'm not against him, but I'm closer to some other thinkers than Bruno Latour. But it doesn't matter. I mean, we're sort of in the same area of thinking. And I think that that's what I mean. I mean, there's something paternalistic in using artificial intelligence to help farmers with the collapse of the bees by putting little computers and cameras inside the hives. Okay, maybe that can help too, of course, But what can really help is a kind of representation, not paternalism, representation of the bees and their intelligences and their societies, or the plants, or the rocks, or the stones, into our politics, which we don't have yet in the system. I mean, I've been talking about this I actually gave an interview to the Swiss television with some practical ideas of how to do it. And I'm happy maybe in the closing remarks to talk about that, but if I were to talk about it right now, it would be another lecture, and it would not allow the next lecture to happen. So that's another thing. It's a forum on democracy and the future. But basically the answer that I'm saying, it's not that we should see humans and artificial and robots together on one side and so-called nature on the other, but we should understand that if I drop my cell phone in salt water, it breaks. If I drop it in normal water, it doesn't break. And that's because of the intelligences and properties of salt. which attracts certain things and changes the hardware. It corrodes the inside of the damn cell phone. It's a kind of simple proposition, which is a feminist proposition. Why feminist? I don't know. I mean, feminist science studies have been on this topic for quite a while. And I think it comes from the understanding of the being excluded for so many centuries and for so long. You kind of understand what it feels like to be a leaf with some man out there saying, oh, I must protect you. I have to protect the environment. Wait a minute. Hello, I'm the leaf. I can protect myself. Just give a little space and we can take care of each other. I take care of you, you take care of me. So it's a way out of a paternalistic, patriarchal look on ecology, let's say. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. Yes, with great pleasure.